Wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone. You have tuned in to Esoteric Radio. Today is July 3rd, 2011, one day before the ominous 4th of July, or the alien visitation. And we are tuned in for today's show, which is called The Ciphers and the Gods of Communication. I'm your host, Sevan Bomar, and we're just going to get right into this. Today's show is really inspired by the sequence of the events that have taken place in my life for the last 3 weeks. And I would just like everyone to understand that knowledge in itself is quantum, that sometimes when we view other beings or the higher beings, we have to compensate for the level of their intelligence and how rapidly it is also continuing to increase. And in this we'll find many examples and many answers to what we're experiencing. And so what today's show is really about is it's about removing fear completely and understanding why one may be remaining stagnant on this dimension, because a lot of people are often testifying that they cannot get the proper manifestation or the energy building or the job they want, or many different things that they just can't get a hold of. And why is that happening? And so I think we've explained that already, but we've explained it in different ways. And so it's time to do our best to simplify what exactly is taking place here on Earth. The first thing I want to clear up is a lot of the symbolism being used. The first thing I will say is, when you're not seeing things correctly, for instance, with water, they show that there is a hexagon pattern inside of all water. So many of us that have been into the conspiracy theory and things for a while, we say, well, that hexagon comes exactly from Saturn, and that's hive line programming, et cetera, et cetera. So why does it take us so long to connect that the water is where the programming is taking place, just like we had discovered already, or like I talked a while ago on a show about me discovering that certain agents were drinking their mission when working for some of these top secret government agencies. And then they could pinpoint, once the person completed the mission, they could pinpoint the mission and then zap it from their brain so they wouldn't have the problem with remembering what exactly they did. So it showed that water had, I believe, 40,000 communication panels or cells to store information within each drop. And this brought me to thinking, especially this week, about the gods of communication and how everything starts with communication, because all the things that we desire, whatever it may be, if a person says, oh, I want to extend off the dimension, well, you're going to need to communicate. And you're going to need to have some really good communication. Oh, I need a better job. Well, you're going to need to communicate. All of what starts everything for us is communication. So you could imagine that in the past, that when we didn't know certain things, we were left to figure those things out ourselves. And only the bravest among us started to take that journey and started to go, as they say now, down the rabbit hole to see how deep it gets. And then you're only promised truth, nothing more, because what you'll experience in there is even more than the person revealing the truth can guide you through, because you have to have the experience. And the fail-safe on the dimension is that a person that is not prepared to see it all, which is really frightful because you're just getting so much information at one time, and it's confusing you and you want it to stop. That's really what the highest portal of communication is about. If you cannot control it, it means an endless stream of information and data coming into your mind, and it being more of like the lady on Indiana Jones. She could not take the transmission coming from the alien for a prolonged period. First, in the beginning, it felt very well, and then at a certain point, she was astonished, and then the next point was like, okay, make it stop. And I started to realize, especially in getting in my higher meditations, what many of the initiated individuals in this world were experiencing, and just the path they chose and what that path ultimately led to because of their persistence and sometimes not even looking at things very closely, but mainly a persistence to achieve success. And so I believe 100% the reason for the resistance is for everyone, to train these individuals another way how to come out of something that they cannot get out of themselves because they didn't completely understand it. And I'll explain this from this level. If you look at a lot of the water in some of the cities, like the book Yamamoto points out in the water book, that actually I know his last name ends with Moto, but I'm not sure exactly his name. I believe it's Yamamoto. But he points out that in every single city, this communication diagram, which is a hexagram, is fractaled. And he's showing that it's just being disturbed and it will harm you, but I'm showing it to you as it would cause you never to perceive things the way that they actually are until you got into perfect alignment. Because the real stage of the adept, and this is the state that they left us in, the people we call the creators, the gods, or whatever, the state that they chose to leave this species in. It's not my design. I'm in the design with you, but I can tell you how to get out of the design, or out of the labyrinth, as they love to call it, is, again, first the globulous form, which is called the soul, which even the Egyptians, which of course got their knowledge from the Sumerians, never took credit for. They never took credit for the origination of soul and always gave that to higher beings, mainly the sun. But what they did say is that they were masters over matter. And through their god Ma'at, which is where we get the word matter from, that they could shape and form vehicles that could hold souls. And this becomes really the beginning of what they call high magic, which is the person who has the ability to differentiate between a Ka and a Ra and a Ba, and know how to put those in measurement inside of a creation and then allow it to become animate. And then there continuously is a spawning after that continues to breed these kind of beings. And so the current design that we're on, and many people have a slight difference in the schematic depending upon how many times they've been around certain cycles, but generally starts as this globulous soul inside of a first vessel that we know as the pentagram. This is the fivefold sequence of flesh, 5 senses, 5 fingers, what Leonardo da Vinci had already proven. But then there's another field directly outside of that, that's what we now call the Merkaba, which is really a counter-rotating field of hexagons. So we understand that because our knowledge now being the field in which our programming is done through. I hear also that for those who had already gained wings, because remember, just like you would see insects with wings, there are humans that do have wings, but they're not on this physical plane because this physical plane is a dodecahedron. But when you saw them on the 7th plane, they would have 2 wings, and that's why all angels are drawn from the sphere of El, and El upside down to 7. But what that simply means is that the beings that come from El, which is the moon in this case, are the messengers to this particular planet. Now, again, whoever is running the system and whatever message they have to say and all of that, we've done many shows of picking it apart. But I'm just showing you, again, what the structure is, and just bias, so I don't have to judge it by wasting my time judging it. So when you're talking about a Michael, you're just talking about a mic. Like they say, oh, he's on the microphone, because he's the messenger. And that's how their structure works. Each of their angels or Els are responsible for doing certain things. Now, of course, when you go to other planets, they have the same system going on, but their names will be different because it's just like, well, I'm Chinese and I'm Arcturian. Everyone has their own particular name that they're using, and then they array this design, which is duplicated across the universe, of how to create cycles and structures like the one that we're in called Earth. So getting into the body once more, we have these fields around us, these counter-rotating fields that are seriously out of balance. Somehow there had been what they call a schism in the system, and your whole alignment came off of balance. And when it came off balance, that's when you started seeing outside of you what was really going on inside of you. And this, to the ancients, was like one of the necessary moves. It was like one of the most ingenious plays, is to split the same being in two and have them mirroring each other on the dimension without one knowing that the other one's there. This is the relationship between the soul and the flesh. So what this really all starts to lead to is right now that this big transformation that they were talking about in 2012, man, do you know how many 2012 there's been? How many 2012s have crossed across all these Bach tongues, and these people are moving up levels and down levels? And so what you start to immediately become aware of when you start to push, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but what you start immediately becoming aware of now are the others that are already pushing and already solved most of the problems that you're still having. Because the system is structured where the higher beings, as we're calling them, are continuously creating the reality that we are later going to live in. And they need energy to do that. Now, this doesn't give them a pass and say, okay, well, fine, then take all my energy and create a future that I'm going to get into later on. You still have to understand that there is a very competitive edge that exists in the universe. People see the universe sometimes as just all good and all beautiful and how we are supposed to be. And they go all off on this tangent, but they're just unbalanced people. They've never had, most of them, their third eye open to see that everything is watching. The universe completely knows what stages we're going through, and it is experiencing the alchemy of it. There's two people getting together, they're on a plane with insects. Their whole thing is to see exactly how much they can throw in here with still allowing the society to remain somewhat cohesive, which it's doing a very good job at. Like people say, well, it could be definitely better. Well, it's still here. And when the people that are supposed to be making it better, which is you, me, and all the rest of the people sitting around complaining about what the Illuminati and all these people are doing, that's when it's going to change, and not before then. The earth is into it because the earth recycles humans. It knows that a human has a certain period of time. Like if you're talking to something that's been on in existence for billions of years, a person's 72-year lifespan is nothing compared to that. So the fact is that the universe in all of this has been calibrated by very intelligent beings. They weren't going to let humans and Illuminatis or whatever get here and mess up the system. If at any point the person was only fulfilling the system, it says that they could put spirits on this plane, and it doesn't matter how long they stay here, they'll always continuously grow from their positive and negative experiences, which is exactly what happens. The more that you start to find out, there's growth. So whether you found it out or not still doesn't make a difference. And that's where these ideas of good and evil start to just kind of fold away. Because even approaching this whole thing like many are doing, and even I did in the beginning, which was like, hey, stay away from this, but read about it, so you'll know everything about it. What kind of way is that to approach something that you're telling someone to stay away from? So you see that we could either been in this category where it was similar to the church, where they say, hey, stay away from everything. And then you're just sitting there wondering all day, which a lot of people are doing. Or you're one of these people who have now opened up the book, or they say you've bitten the apple. You now understand the secret to the pentagram and that you're actually inside of one. You start to understand all these things that really, it gives life and it takes life from you so fast. And that's why they mark the stages as the death, the burial, and the resurrection, and that the human could go through several of these within their lifespan. Within one lifespan, you can die and come back so many times. Like I did it 4 or 5 years ago, and now that I know what really happened, now I say, well, wow, it could happen here. So the other thing is to understand the grander beings and what their status was before they got to the level that they're on now, because you'll most certainly hit that level. There's nothing to stop you really from getting there eventually. So the sun in our sky, which is known as Re or Ra, is the youngest right now. It has the most vigor, just like a young man. His father is Jupiter or Jehovah or Jove. His father is Saturn, who's in his crone phase, or as chronos, or in time. Because all of these suns are actually androgynous. Because they've achieved that state of being a big ball in the sky, they've already understood the principle of putting yourself back together after you die. Like you have to go and find your spirit, basically. And for many people, what that actually means is getting their lives back by getting out of this shell that they've been put in. And now they're in a cube. Someone's put a cube over the top of all the extra geometry that the Sumerians left the person in. So they're trying to get out of this cube to actually get into real life again, because they've now read enough to know that they're not experiencing real life, and they've breathed enough to see just moments of the window opening up of the real energy that we're able to carry. And the main thing I want to do is I want to let people know how to access that before my advent from the plane. And what I did personally when this began was I was really diligent at finding the truth. So in the beginning of this, I started with the gods. And so I'm one of the first people to come to, at least from I've heard, to come and say, yes, I did do this in the beginning, but I'm the living proof that it's a ladder. As long as you keep climbing, you don't have to be concerned about all of this other stuff that people are having a problem with when they stay stuck in a particular religion, a particular belief, or whatever, because we're supposed to be ever-changing, ever-growing. And when you stop seeing that in your life, it's the sheer evidence that you're going to die, that you're in the death cycle. And so you have to be aware of that and get ready to move out of that. Like if you see things, they're the same all the time, and even if everything is great, if it's just the same all the time, the same people, the same cycle, beware. Nothing's really changing. You're mistaking the phases between when things happen again as change. So the fact remains here is that the universe, the planets, and all these systems are united, but in conflict. That's what they call a universe. United, but verse. You're in conflict. And we can witness this under the microscope, not from the level, if people want to know if I'm telling the truth or not from the level of just your immediate reality, but if you go under the microscope, you'll see all the time that ions, atoms, and different things bond and collide with one another in order to form more complex forms. And this is called an organism. And this gets really close to our word orgasm, and it really gets close to our word orgone. Because the only thing that unites all of these myriad of beings, like if you see the Hindu pantheism, I mean, it's vast. Then you see all these Buddhas, and it's vast. And then you see the products of Sion and all of the different psionic lords they've made, it's vast. But you're seeing all these beings, but for some reason they're hanging around. It's like, hey, man, don't you got something else to do besides hang around with us? No. They're united. Like on the dollar bill, it says, out of many comes one. And why is this? Because there has to be a union for everyone to keep manifesting their ideas and reality. Meaning that when someone or something is having a thought, it doesn't end with it just being a thought. There needs to be things to put it in play. There needs to be energy to get that thought. And so everyone is agreed to have at it at the energy. And this really becomes almost like the ejaculation from a man when the semen are going to the egg. There's somewhat of a competition going on there because they know that the first one to reach something first, meaning the first one to have the first idea about something, like we say, well, that idea is mine. I'm the originator of that. Gets to gain the energy just like a farmer who plants a seed. He gets to gain the energy of what seed he planted. So these are universal laws and rules which go way beyond like I said, the rainbows and the teddy bears that the Western world has been raised on because they're under a Saturnalian culture. A Saturnalian culture actually teaches all the beings that you're always a child, and you always have a father, and thus your father will always take care of you. And it starts taking extra steps, especially with the advent of Lucifer, or the light, as they call it. It starts taking extra steps to explain to the person even more why they don't even have to worry about grabbing the wheel again, because it's a little scary out there. You can stay here and we'll keep inventing experiences for you. Here, look, here's Lady Gaga. That's also the name for Saturn's biggest moon. And that's how, just like insects, humans are becoming, the word I'm looking for is captivated. They're becoming captivated by these lights and by this experience. A very unique tool to use when this is happening to you is just to simply say to yourself, how long can I really do this? If I did this for like 8 aeons, if I was like rich for like 8 aeons on Earth, I wouldn't even make it to 8 aeons. Like I would probably get past 3 lifetimes of really rich and then totally be ready to experience what else is out there. So what else is really out there? Then you start to scramble for the books of all the people who tried to answer that question. But the fact is, it's one-sided because it needs you to experience it. You could never just read it. This would be like the same as someone reading about London and imagining what they read is just like going to London. It's not like that. Spirituality especially. It takes you to actually experience it. So I hear a lot of philosophies now from different people, and they're telling me all this different stuff. But the fact of the matter is that they're incorrect because they don't have third eyes. They're not able to see that these eyeballs that they're using as the Illuminati symbol, that's not the Illuminati symbol. It's just a symbol of a person that's enlightened because they see how many things are watching them. Everything. Everything's watching and taking notes and also waiting for a moment to get energy that is like basically comes from the master's table. It's the spent up energy that spills out of us, whether we're playing a video game, whether we're on the phone yelling at someone, or whether we're in a game, actual sports game, and we're cheering. At each point, there's beings, many of them, stationed to receive energy because they understand the principle of the orgasm and the organism. So I'm looking at where we're at now is at an extreme advantage because we've been imparted with this ability to part for a moment, party, from the hive mind of everything like a beehive where everyone has the same instructions and it's just, that's what you're doing. To have this other integer where we say, well, let me see if I can invent something new, even though if you really knew the highest knowledge, you would know that there's nothing really new. They resetted you so you can have the joy of creating something, and yet we're still sitting around like waiting on something to happen beside us. So what I started to see in the future was many people, after they left this world, regretted that they didn't utilize all of the stuff that was here, that they didn't take this droid and push it as far as it could really go as far as knowledge is concerned, that they didn't take these plants and figure out how to do one-on-one chemistry and start breaking them down to the first molecule and ingesting them so they can make communication. That they didn't go to Peru when they knew that the gate had moved from Meru to Peru and at least see what was going on. They rather just imagine there's reptilians there and that they shouldn't go because those reptilians are there, even though they're part reptilian. So the fact is that it got really crazy as the communication started to become disturbed. And my main advent next, because I'm definitely not in the phase of communication right now, meaning that even though I'm talking to you right now, you can hear there's breaks in my speech because I've been really working more with my chakra facilities and getting information so that I can, in essence, so that I can get as much as I need to finally take this to the next level because it's really obvious to me that I'm not on the level that I'm supposed to be on in regards to the knowledge that we've continuously bought for the last 2 years. 3 years. And I've been told that's really because of that last thing you learned last week. That's really the life that I've been living for a year now, is always growing so much in a week that I say, well, I'm glad things didn't really happen before this because now I know this. But I started realizing after a while that I was really kidding myself. So I started really pushing hard within these last 2 weeks, and I actually blew up the computer, which became quite a problem. But I was pushing really hard with the activation and the energy to finish a lot of things to make sure that we continuously deliver with the resistance. Everyone understands our financial situation, et cetera, but I've taken now to working the matrix and pulling people out of the matrix. And so now we're going to be releasing the new book. And that's going to be awesome because I write way better than I talk now. And I have illustrator, Mr. Spirit Matter Pablo, who I know who's listening, just an awesome illustrator, so he can really, really convey what I'm saying or what I'm seeing, actually, into paper, and so the person can see it and say, oh, okay, that's how it works. That, the whole Ra thing in Dubai, and I can see it on the map now, and there's 33 degrees, there's the whole 33-degree point, there's all the buildings. So it's like getting the information that it obviously appears to me that these individuals that are right now teaching occult knowledge have no intention on making cohesive for the human, because this orgasmic relationship that exists here on this planet is embedded within everything. And it's funny because people that talk about, I want to tell you something about this Catholic Church. People that talk about sex and things of that nature are always kind of looked at as perverts and things after a while. But it's interesting is the whole society is hinged on this sexual relationship. So what the Catholic Church did was they made sure that the people who were coming into Christianity and all the derivatives of Christianity, or really Krishna and Isis type religions and Buddhist type religions, were going to not talk about the sex and things of that nature in the tantrics, so that they wouldn't understand the machinations of what was really going on here, because at the moment you start to build up energy, you're going to start discovering what's going on. So they got them. The next people were to get was the ones who were actually opposite. They didn't care. They were just going and having sex with everyone. They were promiscuous. And they got them by making it okay to do that. And so the sex and union and all that lost its meaning. So they're like, okay, now we got both parties. But the fact is, like, look at the baseball, as True Theory was pointing out, the basketball court. You got the backboard in your room. You got the headboard. It's still courtship. You're courting someone or courting a female. All of the symbolism behind the baseball diamond being a Masonic symbol, and then that in turn being the Star of David and the union of the flesh and then the spirit. All of I was even looking at a movie yesterday, The Tourist, where all of the artists and things are named the same names. They got at least the name that they're using for Venus appearing twice in 2 movies, The Adjustment Bureau and in this, and then they have all the Davids continuously reoccurring. So what you start to see is that there is this masculine, feminine, straight line in zero or pole in whole going on with the dimension, and that means that we're still relatively in a binary world of just ones and zeros, or a penis and a vagina. And that is the furthest that man has really taken it for everyone. Remember, there's small groups quantumly into another reality and programming, and they got architects and they're building worlds and they're doing all sorts of stuff wholly existing ethereal. But where they just manage to get the whole mass of everyone, because remember, they're not going to forget about the masses, but they're not going to stay around with the mass. Understand that. The higher beings are not going to stay around with the mass, but they understand. Those are our kids. That's like a core supply of our energy. We're going to make sure it keeps moving up levels, but the slowest it's moving right now is they're on 1-0. And they're on the 101, the first course. And so all of the words like communication have still something to do with, or Jesus saying, I'm raising from the dead. All of these terms have something to do with either when you're aroused, motivated, and turned on, or you're not. Because if you're aroused, motivated, and turned on, you're like in the gym, working out, you're making it happen. Because there is some energy flowing through you, and you feel like it's in your best interest to keep going. And I'm encouraging people to don't let this esoteric stuff rob you of that. It's supposed to empower you. And how it empowers you is you start to understand that your whole quest is not like whatever you experience. You can't say, well, you can't beat yourself up all day because you picked up the book on witchcraft 10 years ago and you seem to be getting some residual effect. You're getting the residual effect because you're still crucifying yourself about you being curious about something besides what you were looking at. And so what people have to now get out of their mind is judging. And I always, like I said, I frown when people leave the network because it just shows. When a person begins to judge things and not just take the information, then automatically they're showing their fear, then they're showing their limitation, and then they only get to a certain point. So if it takes them next lifetime to figure out something else that's already been discovered, meaning someone already put the path there for you, showed you which way to go, but now you have to really take in that information and say for yourself, okay, that's true. Because you can't sit here and go by someone else's word and they say, well, it's true. You're going to need to definitely see it for yourself. So what's about to happen for humanity is it's going to see for itself. And many of us are already starting to go into that phase, that these worlds that they've been talking about and these beings that they've been talking about are here already. And when you get to the level of being able to vividly see them and recognize them, there is a mutual level of respect in regards to they know that they can't pull it on you. So really what you're trying to get to the level of is just like any woman. If the woman starts off as a virgin, you look at this word, virgin. Also, they call it virtuous, etc. What they're showing you is that this individual learns the first symbol of the dimension, which is actually the M, which is what it looks like a M, which is the symbol for Virgo. And what they're saying is that symbol means service, because all those that work for Earth are in service. So the first thing the virgin, which we all were at some point, learned was how to be in service. And that, for many of us, did not come in the spectacular way that we thought that it should have, etc. And many, especially women. So what the women learn in a very difficult way is the service of this whole system. And this is just something that's happening, people. This is not something that I'm creating, and this is not something that I originated. This is something that's happening, but what's empowering me is to recognize that it's actually going on and then actually start to pull the programming apart of my own mind by realizing that, oh, I can hack my own brain. I'm on a 0-on-1. This is like a labyrinth, and there's a minotaur in here. He's called Taurus or Bull. And it's shaped like a donut, which is the same shape as the outer field of our aura. And that there's a heavy part of this where I'm basically getting screwed and I'm not getting back what I put out. And that's what's happening to many people in the reality, is that the reality is taking so much energy from them for what they're getting back. It's still fair to them because they're on the system of money, but in relativity, a person with $8 billion is not worth more, or inkling, or doesn't have the same value as a chemist. Because the chemist knows how to generate things that equal more than just dead paper. And so that's really where we start to get into things now with our next step in humanity, is to understand the real value of what we have at our disposal here on Earth, getting together with individuals that can put the pieces, or like I say, put the Voltron together for you. If you're the head, if there's the arms, there's the other leg, etc. But this just means being able to hook up with people that are specialists at certain things, and they need to gain from you the rest of the specialty, meaning the original plan that was laid out by the Mayans is they said that before 2012, the human beings on this earth need to visit, as in like a pilgrimage, some type of nomadic thing, every single chakra, that the chakra center on the earth, so that they can inherit all the energy, so they can be familiar with those energies and how to keep them in balance. So where did we go? Nowhere. We sat at home imagining if we watched the place on TV that was going to be enough. Even for those that have actually realized that they actually need to visit some of these places, so they gave us one more boost. They said, hey, well then grab the 13 synergy crystals And those correspond to still the 13 chakras that are here on the planet, and get those because those stones come from those places, and then put those on your chakra center. We'll make it even easier. You can get it FedEx. So what I was saying again about why so many people were going to regret their visit here if they don't start utilizing some of this stuff is because they're going to realize that it wasn't really as bad as that they started to make it. They just became ungrateful. We all did it. We had so much stuff. Like, I got a computer, and they say, oh, the computer's bad for you. Okay, well, let's go hang out in the jungle then and sit there. Well, you know, we're not there anymore. We're here. You need to be in the now. Use it. Utilize what you have to get yourself to the next level. Don't be looking at the person next to you and how they're frowning at you and things of that nature to determine, because they're not going nowhere, because they're still in judgment. And being in judgment is like a mirror. You're judging the person is judging you. They're just two stagnant beings. Get away from them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take some calls, because I actually had a really interesting show laid out for today. But again, because the computer went dead, all my notes were gone. And which is okay, because I totally like to just come on here and just do it sometimes and just talk from my heart and from all my chakras, and just to explain to people what's going on. But I know that 100% that I can't be talking to people anymore about this. I have to be showing them. And that's what I'm working here on, is just getting it cohesive so people can start coming to see this that are really interested in it, because I definitely unlocked it. Like, I do have the great arcanum, and it was never a problem for a person to possess that. They just have to be very diligent. You can't get sidetracked. If you find yourself doing something, and that's just been my character through life, if I see myself doing the same thing for like 3 to 6 months, I get weird and I just move, or I move out of the place I'm in, or I change jobs or something like that, because I'd never just liked that feeling, and that's maybe something I carried over from a past life. But the fact is, I know now 100% that if you see someone looping or saying the same thing over and over again around you, they keep telling you about experiences they had, but they don't realize that they told you about that like at least 2 or 3 times. If you see that happening to you, you're in a sure case of the program running around you, a person that has not learned how to hack their mind or get out of the illusion, and they're attempting to just pull you back into the hive mind. And so for all those that want to ask questions, I'm asking to press 1. I see there's 2 callers that have already done that. I'm just going to check the time really quick here to see how much is left in the show. You know, we can change so many things on Blog Talk. Now they don't have that time up there anymore. But I guess it's about 20 minutes, so we're going to start taking the show. But if for some reason we just click off out of nowhere, know that it was because we don't even have the time panel up anymore here. Okay, so we're going to start with caller with the area code 239, the last 4 digits, 3129. That caller, you are now on the air. Yes, caller of the last 4 digits, 3129. You're on the air with Esoteric Radio. Okay, sir, I'm going to have to ask you, it appears that your telephone line is breaking up really bad. When you were listening to the show, was it clear? Okay, sir, well, I'm going to have to ask, I'm going to open up another line. I'm just going to ask you maybe to call back in, or to call back in from a landline. I'm going to, okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up the line once more for another caller, which is calling from the last 4 digits, 6839. Caller, are you loud and clear?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Okay, so that was the gentleman's line. I guess he did hang up from the switchboard, so I think he's going to call back. Okay, so how can we help you, sir? You're on Esoteric Radio.
All right, first of all, great show today. I did have 2 questions. I've heard of the Earth having 12 vortex points. Where did you get the 13th vortex point from? Do you mean the core of the Earth?
It would always be a center point to everything, and that's what happens with a lot of our geometry. That's what I was looking at as far as the simplex on Wikipedia. If you look at simplexes, like the 6 simplex is actually a 7-point star, that they're counting another point. But in reality, just to make it simple, this tribe of Dan was the 13th tribe. And if you understand Dan as an anagram for DNA, it basically means that the DNA remained hidden, like the Ophiuchus or the serpent bearer, the one who could carry the Kundalini remained hidden. And so there's this hidden point on Earth, which we kind of could sync with the center of the Earth because they always talk about that being an unknown region, that actually has the last segment of our activation, if that makes sense. And so there was always known to be this 13th hidden one, and I was writing a chapter in the book, and that's what it's really based on. It's called What Remains Hidden, and it talks about basically why there's no 13th font on Photoshop and Word. There's no 13th size font. There's no 13th floor, because the 13 remained hidden because that was the letter M, and the letter M corresponded to the mothership, which was really the moon. And all the UFOs that we were seeing are just scout ships or carriers, etc. But the main jump point first, the ancients made it very simple. The main jump point is right there on the moon, and then the next one is Venus, and then the adjacent one is Mars. And these being the actual wombs that one comes through as if you were like clay and beginning to shape you by surrounding you with these fields that you gain every time you go through a womb or iris of an actual planet. And so that's really where that the 13th definitely came up at. But I know these are the major points, and then it starts to, in the mathematics that we understand as Merkaba mysticism, it starts to break apart in those number sequences, like 144, different points that still are linked and tied into those networks.
Oh, okay. You also said something about taking a pilgrimage to the chakra points of the Earth. I mean, if we look at the Earth's energy grid with those 12 major vortexes, a lot of them are in the middle of the ocean. So how would one, I mean, are we expected to take a boat out there, or where are exactly these chakra points that you're speaking of? Because I've heard that, in this new age, people will start to group up and take pilgrimage places. That's interesting.
Right. Well, the main thing is to understand those other points. It's almost like the same thing with the meridians in our body through acupuncture, that you tap one point and it still directly links to the main artery. So I believe that was 100% the purpose of the breastplate or the synergy crystal, was that synergy crystal was still connected. Like they say, if you break down the cell of an individual, it breaks down to 13 or 12. The 13th one is bioplasm, which is all of them mixed together. It breaks down to 12 cells or 12 cell salts. And so this is kind of like the same thing with the crystals, that there's like 12 master crystals, and then everything else is just a fractive or a derivative of that. And the weird part is I started understanding that in colors in a weird way, and I won't get into it too much here, but it was basically understanding that the opposite of green was red, and so they're basically in the same family together because that one's on this dimension and that one's on another. So that's why there's the red pill and the blue pill, not the red pill and the green pill. And if you understand how colors mix together, you can actually begin to see how races are split up on Earth, and that allows us to get all these different abilities into all these different combinations. But that is the main thing, is that the 13th, to make it more correct, is actually when one gains all the elements and then mixed together makes this new element.
Okay. I thought we only had 7 chakra points. I mean, I've heard people speak about 12. Can you extrapolate on that? I don't want to take over the show or nothing. I know I got a million questions.
Oh, man, I mean, these are still good questions. The reality is that I've seen chakra point charts that are much more complex than the major 7 chakras. But again, if you have an organ system, and we have more organs than just the 7 that they're pointing out, especially if you start calling things like the pituitary gland an organ. So you can see how easily these numbers could get as high as when we look in the sky and someone says, well, that's a planet, or NASA says, that's a planet. But that doesn't mean that there's not 2 more planets adjacent to that. It's just they are not categorizing that necessarily as a planet. So the fact still remains is that there's these other points or other eyes, and that's the easiest way to see it, is that all of these are portals, and they contain on top of them strange shapes that correspond to all of the hardwiring of the dimension. So let's say, for instance, this dimension is all you can get out of a hexagram. But in all the rest of the geometry that's being used. But in other dimensions, like it talks about in some of those books about the center of the Earth, qualyism, etc., is that there are strange angles, sometimes only curves. no straight lines, etc. So this is where we know some have already explored to come back with the information. So the fact is that I was just told directly to not look at my body as being on the same geometric or schematic pattern as my predecessors, because they were constantly upgrading how many chakras you have, how many things you have access to. And you really get that in the higher states of consciousness, that you see that a person's not using their total facilities. Even if they say, oh, I'm using all 7 chakras, there's, again, all these other glands and organs that secrete certain types of fluid that would mix in the back that will cause a completely different effect or a more graduated state.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it makes me think of, how we only have about 12 of our 64 DNA strands that are active. Would this, the more chakras we get, would that activate more DNA strands, or do we have to activate the DNA strands first to have access to these higher chakras, these 12?
It would be easier. It would be easier to look at the DNA strand because it's in a way more superior than the chakras, because the chakras are still limited to the vehicle that we're using. It's almost like, well, you got a motor, you got an alternator, you got a battery, but that doesn't mean you have the most advanced vehicle. A spaceship's going to come in with maybe just a magnetic battery. So the fact is that what we're really looking at is that a lot of the information that's been delivered about what we have has come from the Eastern teachings, and the Eastern teachings were kind of set in play about 2,000 years ago, running on a particular prototype. And what we're looking at is that the communication between our planet, or seeding between our planet and Saturn, has caused a mutation within our DNA structure. And so with certain elements, and I guess, we'll wait for at least another show to begin to talk about those elements, but with certain elements, everything was turned on at once. But the fact is that you really realize the nightmare of having all of your stuff turned on without yet gaining the ability to learn how to decipher. It just became way too much, and it became fearful. That's really the reality of having everything turned on. So basically you have this, if you look at the DNA, and each one is like a dip switch of just a 0 and a 1, basically. It's either on or it's off. And when it's on, you gain insight and perception into another world and things that you did not know before. And this is the miraculous thing about what we're in, and that's why I'm telling people now, look, man, get a little chemistry 101, go grab some encyclopedias on occultism and things, and listen to a couple radio shows and start getting on your own about getting off the dimension, because there's definitely more than enough of them that are exactly the way that you want them, which is determined by your frequency. And even being able to test your frequency. I mean, now there's an app on the iPhone where you can test your magnetic field, so you can know right in your meditation if you're really going higher or not. So is the person just going to sit back and allow all this to just kind of go by and still complain about it, or are we going to start getting into it to expand our levels of consciousness?
Right. I mean, I see what you're saying when the fear comes in, because whenever I'm meditating and trying to expand my mind, I start having visualizations. When you really try to let go and expand your mind and consider all possibilities, it is fearful. I feel like I'm being watched and possibly messed with by astral entities. They want to keep you afraid. It's very hard to pass that fear when you really try to expand your mind past just your regular body state and expand it to at least world consciousness.
Exactly, because the first stages actually are you lose control. It's almost like you may perceive it as that they're actually taking control of you, but the fact is that the primary vehicle that you've been using is not applicable, and you're basically getting into a new car and you don't even know how to drive it. So it feels like, hey, man, I don't have no control over this. And I've been through, and I'm definitely going to be documenting a lot of this now, because I've now passed through these planes and come back. And you actually start coming back enough to start realizing, hey, man, you're always going to come back. And that starts to limit fear, because you're like, well, shoot, if I'm going to come back anyway, I don't have to be really afraid of continuously going. But, again, there were certain other things that were happening, as I noticed, when you were passing through gates. And this is some main thing to bring up, and I'm glad I got a chance to remember this during the show. I got a chance to tap into a certain level of energy, and what it said basically is that we decided that naturally we always go directly through anything. We never go around any field, because we don't know how wide that field is. and that's what you're experiencing on Earth. And so basically what they were telling me is that the reason why you chose to come to Earth is because you're actually going through Earth, and you're doing that really fast. And you're saying the same direction that you're going is when you're in meditation, you actually start to go what appears to be down through planes. But it seems to be much easier to go down from third to 3, 2, 1, 0, and then you're out, as they talk about in the hemisphere synchronization, instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ad infinitum into a reality that's basically just archetypes. The numbers are just archetypes. And like I said, the name of the messenger would be in the archetype, well, it's Michael. But these are just like, okay, well, anyone can be a Michael. It's just the name that they're giving to the particular person who's doing the communication. And so that's how the numbers are laid out in Infinite, that, oh, these are just numbers fulfilling their sequence. But the goal is to get out of the numbers, to get into, because it's making you numb. It's taking away all your senses and feeling. Get into these new languages, which are like taken in now light transmission. Then there also seems to be very weird glyphs when you're passing through some of these planes. And again, the mind can immediately attack and say, well, what are you doing, man? I mean, are you sure about this? What if something happens to us? But again, where are we going to go if someone doesn't do this? And so I believe that there's many of us, as I said, I started to pass through dimensions, and it seemed like beings were checking me, like scanning me. And there was something in me that corresponded to this plane. Like if you're born on Earth, there's a mark that Earth gives you just because you're here, maybe your fingerprint. And they said, oh, this is from there, let it go. Because it felt like they didn't want the trouble that comes with messing with beings that come from here when they're trying to pass into high levels. But the first thing, of course, that you're dealing with is your mind. It's the mind saying, oh, my goodness, don't go anywhere. Like, I totally love this. Because that's what's really happening from a fleshly level, just like it doesn't take much for a dog to really be happy. On the fleshly level, the fleshly being is really satisfied with what's going on. That's why it hasn't really gone crazy and started to really shake things up. It's the spiritual being that's trapped inside the fleshly being through the geometry that's having a problem because it doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to split. Again, it's afraid of if it happens to lose its memory one more time, it will lose all of its progress. And so that's what they say, to really work on just your consciousness, because it will be going with you, but it has to consist of something real. And that's now why we're tapping into this higher level of knowledge, because that's the only thing that's real. The rest of the stuff is like, it's just another person's opinion. And we can't necessarily say these people are wrong because they just express their opinion before all of their eyes are open. But after you truly see how it is, when your geometry of communication is perfect and your spheres are in balance, then you see what it is. You see it's not good or evil, or it's good and evil. But whatever one of those. And so, it's quite, like I said, it's an EverQuest, and it's quite an adventure for us to be getting into.
Well, thanks a lot. I won't take up any more time, but thanks a lot.
I do appreciate you calling in. I'm going to go ahead and open up the line again for the caller. The last 4 digits is 3129. I'm going to check and see if you're able to hear, or if I'm able to hear you. Caller, hold on, caller, switchboard's a little slow here. Okay, caller from 3129, you're now on the air, Esoteric Radio. Hello? Uh-huh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It is breaking up a little bit, but you may want to go really fast with the question, and maybe I can transmit it to you. Dan.
So I had a question about this. How will that?
Okay, but once again, the line doesn't appear to be coming through. If you want to send me an email about the question, then I can definitely get an answer. I'm going to keep pushing through this. The last 4 digits is 3619. Caller, you're on the air, Esoteric Radio.
Peace, how you doing, brother? Peace.
I'm doing really good, brother.
I got a question for you about, I heard you, I believe last week you would talk about the different herbs you was taking, like the Go-To Cola to open up the pineal gland. Would you suggest drinking Go-To Cola in a tea or smoking the herb or burning it as an incense? And what about other herbs like mugwort and wormwood? What are the effects that they have on the pineal and astral projector?
The reality of it is, brother, you need to really research the acacia bark, because the reality still is that all of those herbs are still not contained derivative of what the pineal gland needs to completely stimulate itself. But again, what you're dealing with is two levels here. You have the gluticola and the alfalfas and the different greens, any herb, the oregano, those kind of things to actually soften up and get you ready. Because really, I only can tell people now, man, exercise, know your own limits, and don't just go crazy with it, because you don't want to open up the portal and not be able to close it. So what it really means is it means first getting it like a ladder, where you're first building up a certain level of your energy and your mental perception by starting with the frequency, starting with the gluticolas, and working into the gene builders, the GAR35s, the Shaojits, etc. And then once you feel like that you're ready to have that first level of experience, then you start to research the spirit molecule, because in that, it's going to take you right there. And so that's really the gist of it. I mean, I don't have time to waste people's time on dimension. I don't have time to hold back information about things, because we're all in a state of somewhat of peril, which means that they're just trying to split everyone again. So the fact is that research things of that nature in regards to completely having that awakening, so that you understand what you really need to do, but at the same time, exercise discretion. You may want to get with me on the resistance about the effects. Understand the plane first, like where you'll be passing through in your consciousness, and how to keep going through that rather than getting stuck. Because there becomes side effects for individuals, and this is basically the main warning. There are side effects for individuals that completely open up their third eye with just like approaching it because it's sacred. Approaching it like, I'm just going to open up my third eye so I can see other things. Man, if you open up your third eye so you can see all of what's really here and you really understand what's going on here, you wouldn't be able to handle it for but a few moments before it would start driving you crazy. There's a reason why these people are going to jobs every day and chained down on like a machine-type structure and working, and you getting their energy pulled from them and arguing and fighting and bickering with each other. And if you saw what that reason really was all the time, you would literally go into a manner, turn it off. So, but the main thing is you can pass by that fear when you have full, and it says 90 more seconds left, when you have full control of your eyes, which is the stair-step process. So now you got to be able to do your own degrees, brother, and it's a shame that we have to be like this. It's a shame that we can't go to even our fathers and say, hey, Dad, could you at least give me a few pointers? I'm kind of stuck. It appears 4 generations ago there was a cutoff between the knowledge of how to get yourself into the higher existence, because many individuals started using that just to propel their own fleshly needs. So the fact is, like I said, research the acacia bark, understand what it means to be immortal, understand the levels. I think in the book, I'll put the excerpt of the Keys of Solomon, but it's just the excerpt. People need to stay away from the talismans and things, but in the excerpt they show the levels and what a person faces in their mind as they're crossing through these levels. Like there's one where there's a double-minded one. There's an antithesis of you right there trying to talk you out of going next. There's Nahima and Lilith, which means a numerous amount of feminine-type beings attempting to get you into orgasm. There seems to be a hive mind oversoul, which we're calling an alien. It has only an interest in continuously recycling you. As you're passing through these levels, and then finally you burst out into the field that everything that ever happened here is there for you to access. The information, your answers, your keys are there if you get to that point. And this is what all this has been about, is prepping people for that point, which is going to happen for them. And we only have 5 seconds. I want to say thanks to everyone for tuning in today. Definitely going to get myself a lot more cohesive in a couple weeks. Moon shows coming next week. And thank you for tuning in to Esoteric Radio.
Welcome to Esoteric Radio.